Today, we're diving into the world of one of the most powerful figures in modern history, John D. Rockefeller. But here's the thing. This isn't just a story about oil. No, it's about how one man built an entire empire from the ground up, all by designing a brand new architecture of power.
So let's get one thing straight. He wasn't born into royalty. There was no golden throne just waiting for him.
And you know what? He didn't inherit an empire either. No family business was just handed to him on a silver platter.
He built it, himself, piece by agonizing piece, with a relentless strategy and a vision for control that was, frankly, unmatched.
So that brings us to the big question, right? The one we're going to tackle in this explainer? How on earth did one man manage to control 90% of America's oil? This is the story of a guy who didn't just play the game of capitalism, he mastered it. He completely rewrote the rulebook for everyone else.
All right. To really get a grip on the empire, we have to go back to the beginning. Let's explore the man before he became the monolith.
John D. Rockefeller was born back in 1839, and let's be clear, his family was modest. His upbringing was anything but glamorous. His dad was a traveling salesman, so he was gone a lot. It was really his mother who shaped him. She drilled into him the values that would define his entire life. Ironclad discipline, extreme frugality, and this almost obsessive need to control money. Get this. By the time he was 16, he was already keeping a ledger, tracking every single penny.
Now you got to picture the world he was stepping into. The oil industry in the mid-1800s, it was basically the Wild West. Total chaos, no rules, just tons of small-time producers fighting each other for scraps. But, and this is the key, where everyone else saw a mess, Rockefeller saw a system just begging to be built. He saw a massive, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity hiding right there in all that chaos.
And here is where you see his genius really spark. He made a critical decision right at the start. He looked at drilling for oil and thought, that's a gamble. It's way too risky, too unpredictable. The real power, the place where you could control everything, that was in refining the oil. So that's exactly where he focused all of his energy.
Okay, so how did he take that focus on refining and turn it into absolute total domination? Well, that's where the legendary Standard Oil system comes in.
His strategy was honestly devastatingly simple, and he executed it perfectly through Standard Oil. Step 1, he was obsessed with efficiency. He cut every single cost you could imagine, eliminating all waste. Step 2, he used his huge size to cut these secret backroom deals with the railroads, getting shipping rates no one else could touch. And Step 3, armed with that massive advantage, he went to his competitors with a very simple choice. Sell out to me, or I will drive you into the ground.
So here's the thing you absolutely have to understand. When we talk about the Standard Oil monopoly, we're not just talking about selling a bunch of oil. No, this was about calculated domination of the entire system. He controlled the pipelines, the refineries, the storage, the transportation. He basically owned the entire infrastructure of the industry.
Now, that level of control, as you can imagine, led to just unimaginable wealth. But here's a rule of history. That kind of power never goes unnoticed, and it always attracts resistance.
Just take a second and look at this number. At his peak, John D. Rockefeller was the richest person in modern history. If you adjust for inflation today, we're talking about a personal fortune of over $400 billion. It's a number so big, it's kind of hard to even wrap your head around.
And yet, and this is what's so fascinating, despite that insane wealth, he lived a pretty modest life. He wasn't throwing flashy parties or showing off. He understood a really fundamental principle. True power isn't about getting attention. It's about maintaining quiet, absolute control behind the scenes.
But the system he built was just too big, too dominant to be ignored forever. After decades of public anger and political pressure, the government finally had to act. In 1911, in this huge landmark case, the Supreme Court declared Standard Oil was an illegal monopoly. The order? Break it up into 34 separate companies.
But, and you're going to love this, here's the ultimate irony. The government breaks up his company, right? But Rockefeller still owned a big chunk of stock in every single one of those 34 new companies. And the breakup? It actually made him richer, way richer. How? Well, investors realized that all the individual pieces, companies that would eventually become giants like Exxon, Mobil, and Chevron, were worth way more on their own than as one big company. It unlocked all this hidden value, and his personal wealth just exploded.
So what happens when the oil empire is officially taken apart? Well, this is where the story takes a fascinating turn. It shifts from being about building wealth to be about building a different and maybe even more lasting kind of power: influence.
In his later years, Rockefeller made a huge pivot. He started pouring that massive fortune into philanthropy, creating institutions that would literally reshape the world. And look where he focused: big systemic problems: medical research, public health, education. He basically invented the blueprint for the kind of large-scale philanthropy we see today.
Okay, so how do we look at this second chapter of his life? Well, there are two very different ways to see it. On one hand, his critics say it was all just a PR move, a way to repair his reputation, to wash away the image of the ruthless monopolist. But on the other hand, his supporters saw it as true vision. They believed he was using his fortune and his genius for systems to solve some of humanity's biggest problems.
And that influence, it absolutely continues today. The family isn't really in the oil business anymore, but the Rockefeller name and the systems they created are still deeply woven into modern finance, venture capital, and those big institutions that shape global policy. The empire didn't disappear, it just transformed.
And that, right there, is the real heart of his legacy. It's not the money. It's not even the oil. It's the blueprint. His relentless focus on efficiency, on controlling everything from top to bottom, on total domination of a system, that became the model for how so many massive corporations operate to this very day.
Which brings us to a final, powerful thought. What John D. Rockefeller really proved is that powerful systems can outlast powerful people. That true, enduring power isn't just about how much money you can pile up. It's about building structures of influence that continue to shape the world long, long after you're gone. And that leaves us with a pretty big question, doesn't it? What kind of influence does a legacy like that still have on our world today?